We are thrilled to be able to present this major exhibition by one of my all-time favorite artists and one of the great American icons of the 20th century, Robert Motherwell. And I am pleased that we have not only Daniel Haxall with us this evening, who's going to speak, but Michael Mahnke is here. Michael is the collections manager at the Dedalus Foundation, which is, in essence, the Robert Motherwell estate. Many people don't realize that Motherwell was a James Joyce scholar, and many of his works were titled after characters in Joyce's novels, or he was just enormously influenced by Joyce. And before Motherwell's death, he formed a foundation and named it after the character Stephen Dedalus. So that's how the Dedalus Foundation came to be. The foundation, a few years ago, published the catalog raisonné on Motherwell's graphic work, and just in the last 6 weeks or 2 months, the catalog raisonné of his paintings, collages, and works on paper has been published. There's a copy on the table in the back. Anyone who would like to look through it, it's really quite fascinating. And
a little article in the Times today.
Oh, was there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I haven't seen the
morning,
Times. Great.
Yeah.
So I've asked Michael, considering he came down to represent the foundation, and I'm delighted to give us a greeting before I introduce Daniel.
Well, thank you. Good to see Charlotte is alive and well with lots of art appreciators, especially for Motherwell. I was just looking around, actually. It was so hard to do at an opening because there's so many of you. This is amazing. So you never really get to see the art all so well, but when you do come back the next time to see the art, appreciate all of the disciplines that Motherwell worked with, you know, the printmaking and the painting and the collage and the drawing, because he really felt they were interchangeable. And he moved from one discipline to another so gracefully and really connected each one quite well, and believed in that connection. And you know, and as an artist myself, and for all of the artists, you know, it really is hard to kind of keep extending yourself in new directions. But Motherwell did that, and that's something that I appreciate every day that I'm at the foundation and looking at his work. And it's really great to be able to come to a show that is so well hung and so well conceived, and through someone like Jerald and crew, who do such a nice job over the many years that we've all known each other at putting these shows together. And I really appreciate it, and the foundation really appreciates all of your work. So thank you so much. And
Thank you, Michael.
and the real guy who has the best information is standing to my right. So.
Uh-oh.
Michael, what he said reminded me of something. I don't do this often enough, but I have the best group of people in the world that work here with me every day. And they're spread all over, but all of you know who they are, and I know who they are, and I just want to say thank you to them. I love them. We're a family here, and we're really, one of the things I'm most proud of, I say this frequently, there's not a day we don't laugh. There's not a day that we don't laugh. There's not a day that one of them doesn't cut me off at the knees, but that's... So, Daniel and I have been corresponding for a while and actually met for the first time yesterday. We are working on a couple of different projects together. We are organizing a Robert Motherwell exhibition to be shown in Segovia, Spain at the Esteban Vicente Museum. For those of you who don't know who Vicente is, we represent him as well. He was the only Latin member of the abstract expressionist group, was born in Segovia but lived his life primarily in the United States. And through a set of circumstances, we are working with Daniel as a guest curator to put together a Motherwell show that will be in Segovia, and then we're hoping to tour it to 2 or 3 museums in the United States as well. Daniel has written extensively on abstract expressionists, especially on abstract expressionist collage. Like me, he loves works on paper and loves tearing and putting back together. And we brought him to town this weekend to join us, but also so that we could work on this exhibition that we're going to do. And he is assistant professor up for tenure.
Fingers crossed.
At Kutztown University. And I am delighted to have him here, and he's going to talk to us for just a few minutes about Mr. Motherwell.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is a great turnout to appreciate Motherwell's work. And I just want to start by thanking Jerald and crew for welcoming me to Charlotte. This is my first time, and I've had a great time touring the museums, eating barbecue, spending time at the... That was part of the deal.
That was part of the contract.
But it's been a great time, and I think the city is lucky to have a gallery that putting on shows like this that really are of a museum caliber. This is a great introduction to Motherwell's work. I hope you get to spend some time with it quite a bit here. I'm just going to say a few brief remarks about Motherwell generally. I told Jerald I'm used to speaking for about 90 minutes in my classes. I'm going to spare you. I have a little outline to keep me on track and keep it just a few minutes, so I'll try to stay on course, I promise. You didn't do the homework? Oh, okay. But in any case, I'll be happy to talk with you afterwards. But I just want to give an overview into Motherwell's career and talk a little bit about his life and why I think he deserves the title of Master of the New York School, or one of the Masters of the New York School. He used the term the New York School to describe the artists of the abstract expressionist era, people like Pollock and Rothko, his friends and peers. And I think this exhibition really shows his mastery, as Michael mentioned, of many different mediums, and you get a chance to appreciate that, like other masters from art history, he was a Renaissance man in his interests, in his abilities. For one, he was a master teacher and intellect. He studied philosophy at Stanford. He would start a doctorate in philosophy at Harvard. He started art history studies at Columbia. So he was very well educated, but he also studied art with major printmakers and painters, people like Roberto Matta and Stanley Hayter. So he had a really strong educational background that he converted into a teaching career. He taught at Hunter College, he taught at Black Mountain College in Asheville. So he was very much a teacher and an intellect as well as an artist. He also was really influential in helping to set the intellectual discourse about modernism in America. He was influential in starting a journal called Possibilities. It is probably one of the most famous journals that only had one issue ever. They planned a second one, but it never came to fruition. But in this journal, he brought together John Cage, Harold Rosenberg, Pierre Chareau to unite architecture and music and literature and the visual arts. And it showed Motherwell's dedication to this idea of modernism that could be interdisciplinary, that was so important to him. He also edited a series called The Documents of Modern Art, where he introduced American audiences to Dada and Surrealism. And through that, he really honed his idea of what modernism is. And it was something that we see on display here tonight. We see Motherwell working through his dedication to abstraction and modernism, and it really, I think, shows. He was, of course, a master painter, and it's probably appropriate that I'm positioned in front of several paintings. He was a part of this abstract expressionist group that was known for dramatic gestures. Motherwell was inspired by surrealism and the idea of automatism, which he likened to doodling, except probably a little bit more serious than the doodling that happens during my classes. And it was this effort to really free oneself and to explore possibilities, which is part of why he named the journal that way. But we see that what he was really interested in was trying to go beyond representation. I brought a quote that he often used to describe modern art, to describe abstraction. In it, he cites a poet, Stéphane Mallarmé, who was really influential in his definition of modernism. He said, What better definition of modern art is there than Mallarmé's "the expression of the mysterious aspects of existence, through human language brought back to its essential rhythm. In this way, it endows our sojourn with authenticity and constitutes the only spiritual task. I am inventing a language that must spring from a very new poetics, to paint not the thing, but the effect that it produces." So he wasn't trying to paint an object or an event. He was trying to understand the response to that. He was trying to capture the effect of something like the Spanish Civil War, or reading Joyce, or maybe enjoying a cigarette in some of his collages that use cigarette wrappers, or love. Many of these experiences that make us human, he's trying to find a language that's true to the abstract nature of our thoughts and our emotions. And you see that in paintings that bring together a gesture with his symbolist interest in color. I think one thing that's relevant in looking around at these works is thinking about how Motherwell was a colorist, but also greatly interested in gesture, and brings these two together in a sometimes beautiful tension, where you have moments of control set against moments of spontaneity, and it's something that marks quite a bit of his paintings. He was also a master collagist. As Jerald mentioned, I've got a soft spot in my heart for collage, and the second room is filled with examples of this. Motherwell wasn't so shy about patting himself on the back, and he did say that his contribution to the medium of collage was bringing this aesthetic of action and spontaneity to the medium. You see in these rooms torn paper edges. You see something that seems very immediate, and he worked in a way that really highlights process, but also, he said, brings that kind of aesthetic to this medium in a novel way. He also was novel, I think, because a lot of collage artists used newspaper, sheet music, found objects. You see examples of that in the show, but Motherwell also used his own art. There's a beautiful example of him using one of his prints, and Jerald and crew have hung the original print and the collage next to it, where he essentially cannibalizes his own work and turns it into a collage element as he's constantly revising and revisiting his own works and forms that he creates. So I would add, another way to pat Motherwell on the back is that he also changes this dialogue about collage and what the materials are of collage. It's not just found objects, it's also expensive papers, his own work. It's this process of revision that was interesting to him so much. Motherwell was a master draftsman. You'll see throughout the show examples of his works on paper. You'll see prints that draw from his love of line, his facility with calligraphy. You'll see a lot of his works that really indicate how much he enjoyed paper and working on paper. And then he would transfer that, of course, to printmaking, where he worked with the major print shops in the 20th century. He studied briefly with Stanley Hayter, was completely intimidated by Hayter's workshop, where the major modernists would gather and produce prints. So he ran away from printmaking for about 20 years, but then worked with people like Tatiana Grossman and Kenneth Tyler, major figures, very important artists that he said he collaborated with. And he becomes, in the 60s and 70s, this really amazing printmaker who explores his ability to transfer gesture and collage into the print medium. So he was a master in that regard. As much as we see him working in all these different mediums, we also see, as I mentioned, these range of subjects. His works could relate to the Spanish Civil War, like we have behind us. They could relate to literature. They could relate to his own life and experiences. But ultimately, abstraction and modernism was his effort to not document that per se, but to respond to the effect it produces. He said, I'm trying to evoke not the thing, but the effect it produces, to express the inexpressible. And I think you'll see that he's quite successful in doing so throughout his very long career. So I will pause in boring you formally, but enjoy the show. I think it's really, as I mentioned, an accomplishment of the gallery to put together a survey of this magnitude, and I hope you enjoy his work. And thank you all for gathering tonight.